we go. We need to change this to speaker view for recording. Hello, everyone. It's time. We're here for the October 2021 Jupyter Community Call. Costumes optional, but we do have some lovely costume attendees. You know, I'm going to take off these glasses before I lose my mind. But I do have a few things I want to remind you before the call begins. And the first being, right, that this call is recorded. You just heard it say that, but I always say it for posterity. And also that because this is a Jupyter event, Jupyter community event, we are held to the code of conduct. That includes me. So please don't hesitate. You can review that anytime at jupyter.org/conduct. Yeah. And with that, we're going to get started. If you haven't been here before, this is just a show and tell. People have signed up ahead of time on things that they want to share. And we're going to go through that. I'm going to watch time to make sure that we get to everyone, but basically we're just going to be discussing and getting excited for, you know, what are people doing that's amazing with all the hard work it takes to keep these projects running. So with that, I'm going to actually link the agenda one more time in case anyone came in and I didn't notice it. That'll be in the chat. And here we go. Oh, please sign in if you feel so inclined. It's cool to see who's here. First thing we have though on the list is shout outs, celebrations, short reports. These are kind of things that aren't going to take longer discussion. People want to know. So, oh, we have one being typed right now. How wonderful. Who is that that'd like to speak?
Oh, sorry, that's me. I just was writing a thank you to Zach for bringing up a discussion that I think is long overdue about classic notebooks. So thank you, everybody who's contributing to that discussion constructively.
Yeah, let me.
And a suggestion to folks, if you run into that issue, have a beverage, perhaps a long meal. It's not one to rush through. It's gotten very long at this point, hasn't it?
Yes, and I just shared the link in the chat for anyone who doesn't know. This is an issue discussing that classic notebooks future, as it has been in maintenance mode for a long time, but I know that the maintenance team has some thoughts on that. So I won't paraphrase the issue. I'm not up to date on it, but yeah, that'd be awesome. Thank you for calling that out, Carol. It was really great of him to open it.
Super brave.
It goes to Zach.
Right, but thanks for bringing it up. I don't think Zach's here today, so I didn't.
He's here. He just gave a heart.
Hey,
I missed it.
I'm here. Thank you, Carol. I really appreciate that.
Great. Is there anyone else that would like to, has been inspired for some impromptu announcement? Any cool releases happening? It seems like there is every month. I will be quiet for a few seconds so you have a chance to change your mind. Okay, then. We can always come back to that if somebody wants to add something. Our agenda is really open today. So if you want to come back to something, some kind of announcement you remember later or larger share, feel free to just throw it in the agenda and we will loop back to it. But
May I say something for a second?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry
to interrupt you. I was just looking on the list of who's here and I don't believe he's here yet. So he didn't put his name on the agenda, but I believe Fernando would like to make a short announcement today about what the current state of governance conversation is. And I have said this now in order to leave you all disappointed if he can't make it. But it just occurred to me that he didn't put an agenda item, he just put his name on the list. So I figured I'd say so.
Awesome. I saw that too. I was wondering because he did have his name on it briefly, but then it was removed. So I don't know. I look at this document a few times a month when I forget what's happening. So in that case, though, if we're waiting for that share, I think we actually have an open agenda right now. Right? Okay. Does anyone have anything that they'd like to start the discussion off with? The floor is open. Okay, we're going to get silence. This is good. This is good, everyone.
Unrequited silence is very difficult to deal with as a host.
It's okay.
You're killing it.
On that note, are people familiar with the issue that Carol brought up? Is that something that we want to discuss, or is that too touchy for a community call.
I would propose not having an open
Okay.
conversation about it.
Okay, got it. Trying to stay on topic, but that's fair enough. Okay. We can go back to, I don't want to call anyone specific out, even though I know some of you have cool things going on in the background. So I'm not going to do that. Would we like to do a favorite notebook discussion? We've done that in the past. People share a favorite notebook that they have, that they wrote, that someone else wrote, and talk about why they think it's cool. I think you're all just going to stare at me, but I'm going to throw that out there for topics.
I was gonna maybe ask Roland or others who might be part of that security meeting and just do a quick update, like why it exists and what gets done in it.
Sure, I'd be happy to. When I come to this meeting, I usually have an update, but I don't have one this week. But just to remind everybody, the security meeting is the biweekly meeting that happens on Fridays, 9 a.m. Pacific time. Myself and Rick Wagner from UCSD convene that meeting. The minutes of that meeting go into a Jupyter security repo, and so you can read what we've discussed there in those notes. The repo is Jupyter/security on GitHub. And mainly the purpose of that meeting is to discuss general topics relating to security, not specific vulnerabilities or anything of the day, but basically discussing best practices, how the project actually communicates about security within the project and to the external stakeholders and other people who are users, and trying to organize the security effort kind of into kind of something kind of coherent. So there's currently work going on to understand all of the security documentation across all of the Jupyter projects. We're doing that with Trusted CI, and they're working to kind of put together a kind of outline of all of that security documentation and make recommendations about how we can improve it. So that's where that sub-project came up. We originally were just trying to put together plans for a workshop, but we kind of got drafted into convening that meeting and trying to keep that conversation going. But we want to thank everybody who's doing the real work of addressing vulnerabilities and problems. And what we're trying to do right now is trying to get a handle on what the actual procedures are that people are following, and then trying to turn those into actual policy, actual practices that people need to follow when they're addressing vulnerabilities and then announcing them and handling them and things like that. So that's kind of a general overview. If there's questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Thanks, Roland. You and the supercomputer folks over at UCSD are well positioned to help us guide and navigate through all of this. So I'm really glad you're helping with the process and helping others find their process.
Thanks.
Do you have plans for the security working group being the people who publish patches, or do you want it to remain the case that the individual projects still do those patch publications as releases? Like what's a way to make sure that security patches come out and they come out across all the projects and they come out basically at the fastest rate that we can sustain in your mind?
Well, I don't know the answer to that yet. It does seem like individual subprojects kind of handle their own vulnerabilities, but there is a coordination layer, and it's probably important that there be a coordination layer in the project. Matthias has brought up the possibility of elevating the security topic kind of even higher within NumFocus to coordinate across other projects besides just Jupyter. So there are some things out there where it maybe makes sense to have conversations about security, like NumPy is probably not like a really high priority security wise compared to say Jupyter or Dask or something like that. So there is a sense that there needs to be a set of practices within the project and maybe beyond, and coordination across projects and sub-projects. But you know, I think we haven't quite figured out what that's going to look like yet. But we would encourage people who are interested in the topic to try to make the meeting. I think I've mentioned that it's on Fridays, at every other Friday at 9 Pacific. It's on the community calendar, so you can find it that way. If we find that we need to move that meeting so that more people can join, we can do that as well. But it's very much a conversation, and we are, you know, kind of, I'd say we're kind of newcomers to this kind of governance process, and so we're still trying to kind of pick up what's actually going on. So the more people who can describe what they're doing, I think the better.
That was a
Cool
great
stuff, man.
update. Yeah, thanks for all the updates on that. And I know people have thanked you many times, but I am also happy to hear that this is being discussed and tracked down. There were other people asked in the chat if they wanted to give an update. No? Okay. So maybe would it make sense to go around and say, what projects are different people working on? Some of you I have very much run into in Jupyter spaces, and some of you less so. Is there anyone who's really excited about a project they're working on, or just wants to say, I can also start if you haven't run into me yet?
I love the new configuration system that Martha's been working on. I'm excited
The
for that to drop.
settings,
Yeah.
that's what I mean. There are some people that I know are doing cool things that I was trying not to call out in this meeting, but I know there's some involved people here. If they want to share about settings, I'd love that.
Yeah, that's a good looking project there.
Yeah.
And might be cool to hear where Executable Books is going, because that's a big project around our world too.
I love executable books. Please, please tell us more.
Hello. I thought so.
Hey, Chris,
I'm one of the maintainers of Executable Books, indeed, and the Jupyter book. Yeah, so we're just carrying on. So actually, we are looking into becoming a Jupyter sub-project, kind of by next September. Essentially, we were funded by a Sloan grant for 2 years, mainly funding me to mess around with stuff. And that comes to an end in next September. So Chris Holgraf, the other main person on the project, started to think about how we move on from that, move in transition. So yeah, one of the thoughts is to move to a Jupyter sub-projects. Obviously we're keen in looking at all the governance things that you guys are doing and seeing how we can fit into that. Yeah, that's the main kind of thrust at the moment. There was obviously last month there was the discussion about the variables in notebooks. Kind of keen to push that one at some point. I think it's gone a little bit stale over the last month. So I'm interested to start talking about how to, yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how other people have found some of the discourse. I think this isn't specific to Jupyter really, but I find some of the discourse discussions, they get very big and very complex, and then they kind of get dropped because they get too over complex for people to follow. That was just a thought, but yeah, happy to take any questions or anything.
Would you mind summarizing the executable book project a little in case anyone
Oh
hasn't
yes,
encountered it?
yeah. So I should. So, well, I'll share with you the website. So the focus of the Executable Books is essentially turning a set of Jupyter notebooks into some form of book, primarily whether it be like an online website or a PDF. So there's a nice gallery here, and if anyone wants to submit their own, we've been gathering kind of books that people have been making. So then the idea is it runs via Sphinx, which I'm sure a lot of you know, executes the notebooks, turns them into nice HTML pages and static website. So that's really the key thrust of it. As you can see from the gallery, there's lots of like tutorial based things, and we're trying to push, you know, people just get their notebooks out there. And we're working a lot recently on kind of interactive approaches to these notebooks via the Thesis project, and you can launch you know, Binder Hub directly from your websites and things like that.
We were having a side chat, Chris, in the chat about Mist Parser, and if folks aren't aware of it, it's probably one of the best things that I've seen in a long time when it comes to allowing folks to use restructured text and Markdown in documentation. So maybe you want to just give folks a short snippet of what that is.
Yeah, so essentially, so with Sphinx before, so it's been largely based on restructured text. Obviously, in the world of Jupyter notebooks and a lot of things, GitHub and everything, it's a Markdown world, basically. The Markdown's been getting better. We've got Common Mark now. There's a kind of a standard towards it. But at the same time, it's kind of, if you want to do any kind of scientific publishing, it's largely underpowered. On the other hand, you have restructured text, which has a lot of power, but can't really be used in notebooks, and kind of general users sometimes find it a bit confusing and something they're not used to. So the idea of Mist Markdown is to bring Markdown towards restructured text, giving you the ability just to write normal Markdown, but then also adding in these concepts like directives and roles to be able to, have the full power essentially of what you can do in restructured text, but based on Markdown.
One question for you, Chris. Is there a way to use Markdown doc strings? I haven't figured that one out yet. So like if I want to use AutoDock.
At the moment, no, there's an issue for that. I'm happy to work with anyone to do it.
That one's going to change things.
Just a bit of a... So, if there's a lot of interest in it, I'm happy to do it. I mean, there was a bit of a pain with, trying to get Sphinx and AutoDock to work with it. But what's really nice, also, how I've implemented Mist, is that I've made this Markdown it Python parser. So Markdown it is a big JavaScript library for Markdown parsing. Used in VS Code and things, hopefully soon in Jupyter notebooks. At the moment, it uses a different parser, but it's not the same thing. But what it is, it has a very powerful mechanism that you can add on extensions, and this is how we've added in all these extra features. And with that, basically, it makes it very easy to add in the extra things needed for the doc strings. So I did envision them being very much like your standard Sphinx doc strings, with like the fields and parameters. So I was going to implement that and then work out how to do the API, the AutoDock stuff. But it's on the cards.
Very cool. Carol, what were you saying about, does AutoAPI already handle a little bit of Markdown?
Sorry, I have to find my unmute. I
get it.
found like AutoAPI takes a different approach than AutoDock, and it walks the AST in terms of how it gets the doc strings instead of having to import the libraries themselves that are being documented. So I found you can get, once you get the stubs from that, you can kind of, you know, if you ran it through another process afterwards, you can kind of clean it up a little. But
Right.
that was actually what I was doing before I got on the call. But it's also, I think Sphinx AutoAPI is a lot faster than AutoDock is. You know, different functionality. You know, AutoDock's been around longer, but you might want to check it out if you haven't. It's probably like a year or so old, 2 years maybe.
So which one do you use? AutoAPI? Or do you use a mixture of them? All right. Well, that's the one I use now. Thank you, Carol.
And I think, you know, I think the Read the Docs folks have put some love into it as well. So it's well maintained.
Read the Docs puts in so much love to like small peripheral projects that they don't get enough credit for. Like they clean up so many tiny little things.
Oh yeah, they're great. And also, yeah, we're trying to get Jupyter Books so you can make them with Read the Docs as well. We've been talking to them guys.
You already can.
For documentation.
You already can.
Well, yes, you can. Yeah.
You just got to do that if name. You got to put in the load, right? You just run a bash script and then, or run a sub process and you get Jupyter Book, right? Or is there another way?
You can just do Jupyter Book Sphinx config.
Oh, okay.
It creates the Sphinx config, and then you just run it from there.
Nice.
Like normal. But yeah, that's the main thing. And then yeah, we're trying to get some love into Jupyter Lab as well. Create a Jupyter Lab extension, so it's nicer to read. The only pain with all of these extra things for the Markdown at the moment is obviously when you open it in the Jupyter notebook and you don't have anything, you get some, it doesn't look as nice. So we'd love to integrate more with Jupyter notebooks and have it so that you can open them up and they look just as almost they would when you create these websites.
Thanks for the update, man. Sorry we put you on like a last minute.
No, it's great. Yeah,
proto PhD defense.
Yeah, no. If you have any questions, I'm always happy to answer.
I hope it wasn't proto PhD defense level, but yes, thank you so much for taking that.
Nobody's crying yet.
Okay. Do we have other projects? I did see Binder and Jupyter Hub mentioned in the chat. Does anyone want to speak on updates with that?
Yeah, I can give a quick update. So I guess the big thing that's coming up is Jupyter Hub 2.0. Hopefully by Christmas, with any luck. So the main changes in 2.0 are, I think, I'm going to just paste a change login for anyone who's interested. Yeah, the big change is the introduction of RBAC, so role-based access control. So if anyone knows, the basic idea behind RBAC is that instead of saying someone's either an admin or non-admin, you can now sort of create different roles within Jupyter. So you could have, and then the idea is you can give each role permissions on, say, particular API calls. So for example, you could have someone, you could have, say, maybe a teacher who has read-only, full read-only access, say, all student service, for example, but not access to change anything. I've linked in the change log. There's a couple of betas out already, so feel free to play with it. It's been following discourse, especially the Jupyter Lab RTC discussion. This new RBAC work actually should help to make RBAC to make our Jupyter Lab RTC work really well now. Because with RBAC, you can basically give certain other users access to your sort of server. It's not just a free for all anymore, which we actually would be in the previous one. Yep, thanks for explaining RTC. I'll just get used to it. The other things, some breaking API changes. So one of the more notable changes is in how sort of spawners are launched. So originally when Jupyter was written, it was pretty much everything was just running on a VM. So to have Jupyter Hub single user, spins up a local process, it's fine. Since then, it's expanded quite a lot. So like containers are obviously a big thing now, like Docker Spawner and Kubernetes. And that actually has some sort of really detailed problems when it comes to actually knowing what process you actually launch. So, for example, you can't just, well, there are a lot of people who don't actually want to launch Jupyter single user anymore, or Jupyter Notebook. In fact, if you've got Discourse forums and people are running all sorts of random web proxies, it's all pretty cool. So the idea of some of these breaking changes is to actually make it a lot easier to sort of just run whatever application you want and not have to worry so much about what arguments are being passed, but it's a breaking change. On the Binder Hub side of things, a few of us are doing some work on doing some what we call Binder Hub in a box. So at the moment, Binder Hub, which is what runs mybinder.org, is, well, officially only runs on Kubernetes. That's great for scalability. It's a bit of a pain if you want to run it locally. There's been a lot of chat on the Discourse forum again about how can we basically get the equivalent of Binder Hub, but running it on our own VM. So we've got something prototyped. You can basically now run Binder Hub in Docker or Podman if you're interested. So it runs on a single VM. It actually works surprisingly well. It's not officially released yet because as part of this work, we decided this would be a good time to clean up some of the internal APIs. So we kind of want to do that before we release it. And then after that, we'll officially support the API. And if someone else wants to add some other sort of platform, you're welcome. Okay. Yeah, that's everything.
Awesome. Can I ask, was the RBAC change motivated by what you mentioned, the educational use cases, or was there any other things that you think it'll help?
I'm not exactly sure what motivated it, but I mean, I think it's been going for, the work's been going on for quite a while though. It's not just say 1 or 2 recent PRs, it's been going on for maybe a year at least.
No, that's good. Thank you.
So I got a question. This is not necessarily related, but this is kind of a bigger question. Jupyter Hub, Binder Hub folks. A couple years ago, there were people talking about different experiences that were being launched with these different hubs. Are there any people who are like focused on the user journey, user experience using these things? Has anybody come across your communities that are thinking about those things right now? This might be a bigger, more general question, because like lots of people are spending time in Jupyter Hub, lots of people are spending time in Binder. I'm curious if there are any people coming and like, how do we design this? Like, what are the constraints for people using these things?
I don't think so. I mean, one of the changes that has been made in Jupyter Hub is an attempt to sort of support, like to make it easier to basically put your own interface on top of it. So at the moment, if you want to customize Jupyter Hub, you have to get into Django templates, you have to set paths and everything. It's kind of a bit, yeah, it looks a bit tricky, like to be honest, even I don't really understand it. But so one of the ideas of Jupyter Hub is to have a much cleaner separation between the back end and the front end. So then if you do want to implement your own admin interface on Jupyter Hub or something else, you can do that.
Thanks, Simon.
Yeah, no, I think it would be good to get maybe a UI expert.
Oh, yeah. So
or the Jupyter as a whole.
I've got about like 100 hours in with RTC with people on Binder, and it's totally just a different experience. Like, it's got to be a nice house. And, you know, we're trying to design places for people to like feel comfortable for a little bit. So if anybody comes along those folks, boy, I'd love to organize around that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Oh,
actually, I just noted Tony asked in the chat, is RBAC a server-side thing? So yeah, it's entirely server-side.
Cool.
In fact,
Thank you so much for that update, Simon, especially impromptu one. That was awesome. Okay, we still got time. I'm scanning. I can't see all of you at once for the sake of the recording, but I don't think I see Fernando here still, right? So we're still waiting on that agenda item, yes? Anyone else seen?
Is there anybody back channeled that can ping them?
I don't have a back channel. Yeah.
I will try.
Okay.
Thanks, Darian.
Thank you.
Isabel, I found a notebook from 7 years ago.
Does it work? Would you like to share it? Is that your hook?
I don't know, maybe. It's kind of funny, but it gets to some of these like originally you asked if we wanted to have the notebook conversation. That's a big one. I'd love to have a notebook nostalgia conversation. Like all the good things that have happened because of notebooks. Like I met Carol, Zach, and Isabella and everybody else in this room because of notebooks. That's a great thing. But maybe we can try that. We can share a little bit. It's an ugly ass notebook.
Your mic does not like the wind, Tony, just so you know.
Oh, okay. I'll go inside. I'm inside now. There's no wind anymore. Does that fix it?
Yep.
All right.
Me at least.
Let's have fun with this. And this way we'll kill a little bit of time. Hopefully Fernando shows up. All right. Here's allow. Okay. So this notebook is not mine. This notebook's mine. Let's see. All right. So I wrote this one 6 years ago. I'm sorry. This is 6 years ago. So at the time I was working with Anaconda and I was doing a lot of data visualization with Bokeh, which is super cool because like at the time I didn't want to write a lot of JavaScript and Bokeh makes the JavaScript for me. And this was also before TypeScript time. This is when we had JavaScript displays and CoffeeScript was still a thing. I actually think like Atom existed at the time and people were still writing their extensions in CoffeeScript. I still think CoffeeScript's one of the best programming languages ever, but don't anybody jump on me for that. So what could we do with this? At the end here, we wind up with a plot. This is a Bokeh plot that's in the canvas. And what I used to do is I used to like basically make Bokeh plots interact with the JavaScript in the notebook. But I think we've missed too many versions at this point and some of the interactions don't last anymore. But, you know, at this time, I wasn't good at programming and I was still getting my feet wet with modern HTML, learning how to write JavaScript, learning how to write Python, learning all the tools kits in PyData. So like the notebook was super helpful there, right? So what we could do is this one here, we're constructing a table ourselves. There's probably a better way to do that now with pandas. I wasn't too great with it then. But then we do this like super fun stuff where we'd be like, hey, we just need D3. So we'd require D3 and then all of a sudden we'd have D3 and we could start interacting with, this one's interacting with our table and it's going to go and change things. It's going to go and update the classes. We also need to extract figure data from our image. So every time we run this, we had to basically import D3. We also needed YAML, but just as easy as I could import Python packages, at this time I could import the JavaScript packages. And at the end, they let you do this crazy thing where in JavaScript, there was a kernel, there's an IPython object that said IPython notebook kernel execute, and you could just run code. So you could do super cool stuff. Then we'd also have to do a little bit of editing of the style and put the HTML in here. I don't even know what I was doing in this notebook. I'm just going through it for the sake of posterity here. But then we'd go and plot this, and the expectation would be all the work that we did ahead of time would create interactions when the plot was moving. I don't even know what goes on further here. This goes and commits a notebook, and then we actually take the data and we start working with it using PyQuery. That's a jQuery layer in Python. And here we've got some CoffeeScript magics. I don't even know what's happening at the end of this notebook. The point of it is, though, I have this notebook that's got CSS, JavaScript, CoffeeScript, Python. And at the time when all of those languages were super ambiguous to me, this was the thing that helped me like cut through the ambiguity over time. So thank you to everybody who's worked on notebooks over all the years. This is what got me to where I am today. And those are some of the, I don't know, it's kind of running through that notebook. Like I kind of miss the experimentation that way, but at the same time too, when I do it now, I'm a lot more confident that it's going to be reusable over time. So I'm going to stop there.
Can I want to share a notebook. You inspired me.
Zach, yes!
Hell yeah! Yes!
This is from 8 years ago.
Nice!
One-upping.
So,
wonderful. Thanks.
Zach, you overachiever, you.
just had to jump in. This is very inspiring.
Nice.
I had to dig this up. GitHub took a long time. There was a spinning wheel for a long time to show this. This is my undergraduate thesis. Please don't read it, but it's on GitHub and it's in notebooks. Like you can go look. I didn't even know how to like use a git ignore. There's IPy checkpoints right there. Wait, are you guys all seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, this is super embarrassing. But like, look, it shows up on MB Viewer. There's like a review of a capacitor and some notebooks. But what's really cool is to do this, I took and I wrote just to mimic what Tony was showing us was, I have a notebook. Look, I'm still using PyLab. Do you remember when that was a thing? And it builds a UI. I can't display it in GitHub, but it actually builds a UI. And like I did the same thing Tony did. Here's my little JavaScript display. And here is some very insecure JavaScript to build a UI in the notebook and analyze some data. I don't know if it still works, but it builds this little like interface for interacting with this impedance analyzer from my undergraduate days. So, you know, feel free to check out this repo called impedance and this other repo called Cal Poly Thesis. This was reproducibility back in 2013. So yeah, that's what got me stoked about notebooks. I figured this was a fun little trip down memory lane for me, and I figured I'd share it with y'all. Really, please don't read it though. I started reading some of it and it was a little embarrassing. All right, thanks for letting me share.
Thanks. How did you run into that then for your thesis? If that was the thing that kind of got you excited for it.
Well, so I was at Cal Poly, which of course is one of the homes of Jupyter Notebook. One of the co-founders, Brian, was here. He was my quantum mechanics professor, and I was writing all of this in MATLAB, as you do as a physicist. And I was using a less than legal copy of MATLAB to do all that and was feeling a little bit guilty about that. So I decided I would, we were chatting in one of the classes and he said, you should check out this thing I've been working on. And this was like IPython notebook, like way before it was ever released. I don't think he wanted to show it off very much, but, and then over that summer, that's when the notebook really got developed for that like very initial release, the IPython notebook, which actually looks a lot like Jupyter Lab today. Kind of funny enough, there's like this side panel, and like if you go look at old IPython photos, IPython notebook photos, it's pretty interesting. And then, yeah, I decided like, man, I wonder if I could write like my whole thesis that's in MATLAB in this, you know, open source language Python. So I spent a whole night translating everything I'd written in MATLAB into Jupyter notebooks. And then what's even worse is that UI notebook that I showed you, the UI that I had for the machine prior to that was in LabVIEW. I don't know if anyone knows what LabVIEW is, but there's a throwback. So I had built an entire UI in LabVIEW and then was able to recreate that. And it took me a long time to write that LabVIEW code, because if anybody has written LabVIEW code, it's nearly impossible to debug. It's like just throwing
the original low code.
Yeah, it's like throwing spaghetti on a plate and trying to untangle the spaghetti. And so, yeah, I did that. And then in the night, like wrote it all in JavaScript that just rendered in the notebook. And then I had a whole reproducible notebook that had both the UI at the top of it and then all the analysis at the bottom of it. And then I just printed that notebook and turned it in as my thesis, which I thought was really cool at the time. And then I put it on GitHub and talked about reproducible research for a little while, which was a very new concept to me at the time. So I was very excited, very bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Yeah, and here I am 8 years later, 9 years later.
Yeah, thank you. I love hearing all the history of how people got here. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, all the code before my notebook, like right before that, was just MATLAB code. And like you can slowly see it like becoming more Pythonic, and then eventually just doesn't exist anymore. But it was a practical programming language. Like one thing that like I really miss from MATLAB is the documentation. Like you didn't have to leave MATLAB for documentation. That's the one thing I've always desired from Jupyter, is like a place where I could have the documentation inside. But maybe Matthias's Papyri project's going to get us some of that stuff. There's some things in the works, but documentation is a big problem when your documentation's the web.
I was thinking the same thing about possibly Papyri. Let me find you all a link.
We'll see work from that for a year or two.
Yeah. Anyone else happen to be inspired while I look for that link? I found a 9-year-old notebook. I'm going to one-up both of you. I don't have a 9-year-old notebook, sorry.
Oh, this first slide's so cute.
That was some high schoolers when I was volunteering at the Fab Lab in San Diego, a community nonprofit makerspace. And so they would draw on my whiteboard. And I just thought that one was great. They were a bunch of girls like teaching a whole bunch of guys who didn't know how to code. And it was just the flip side. And it was just very creative how they did it. But the talk that I shared in the Slack, in the Zoom chat, is one that we did at Qualcomm for a bunch of college interns as part of a big summer Grace Hopper thing. And Jess Hamrick was somebody that really did some groundbreaking early work on Jupyter or IPython in education. And so it was sort of a shout out to a lot of the work that she did. So,
I forgot.
I remember now that I haven't thought about it in a long time.
Well, I want to share your thing explainer one now, because you gave that at the Jupyter Day Atlanta, and that one was a fabulous talk.
That one was fun. In fact, I'm working on another one to try and explain sort of Kubernetes type stuff.
Oh, good luck. But yes, good luck.
Yes.
Did anybody dig up any old notebooks while Zach was talking?
I did not dig up an old notebook, but I think just to not keep people in suspense, I will give a shadow of what Fernando would have said, and he can talk some other time because he's clearly not going to make it in the next 11 minutes. So this isn't that big a surprise, I hope. As most of you know, there's been a lot of back and forth on Jupyter governance, and some things have happened. Last year, we created the Jupyter Distinguished Contributors Body, and that was one of the 3 planks of the new governance that we've been heading toward slowly. And right now, we are in the voting phase of this pull request that I linked in the chat for the Software Steering Council. And because this is not yet completed as a vote, and because really it doesn't impose any specific call to action now, the idea, I think, was to just familiarize people with this concept that there will likely be, everything is contingent until a vote is finished, but there will likely be a Software Steering Council. And the premise of the Software Steering Council is, for those of you who work on individual Jupyter sub-projects, those projects will have a group of decision makers who the projects themselves will nominate and pick. And those decision makers, this is a bad way of saying it, not decision makers, rather voters, right? Who will be able to vote on a representative for the sub-project to be in this software steering council, in addition to representatives from software sub-projects. There will be some working groups who will also have representatives in the software steering council. And this is a body whose purpose is to just allow the different projects to keep up with what is happening project-wide, to communicate about initiatives that are very likely going to affect more than one project, and primarily to be the body that votes on and approves Jupyter enhancement proposals, JEPs. Up until now, JEPs have been voted on by the full Jupyter Steering Council. And hopefully, when there's a more targeted software steering council with representatives from each individual project, the conversations can maybe happen a little bit faster and the decisions can be made a little bit more quickly. There isn't any specific thing that you need to do. This is mostly to just let you know that there is this vote happening. If you have input and you would like to weigh in, you should. There is also a weekly governance call that's on the Jupyter calendar, which unfortunately happens at the same time as the security working group every other week. But that is an open call that you are welcome to join if these issues are things that you care about. And yeah, the next thing that is likely to land is this software steering council. Fernando had a lot more to say just about the context and all that, but I want to keep it brief because I have not been as active in the past few weeks anyway, because I'm on leave. So yeah, I mean, if you have any questions, I probably can answer them, but if I can't, I can tell you where to go to get the answers.
Thank you for the update anyways. I do want to check, you said that the governance calls are on the community calendar?
Are they not?
They haven't been on there
haven't
since the beginning of the
seen
year.
them. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I wasn't sure if it was intentional or not.
Oh no, let me link the discourse thread.
Yeah. And Darian has done an amazing job over a number of years shepherding consensus and importance of governance throughout the larger Jupyter community. And for that, you know, he's one of my favorite leaders in the Jupyter community. So thank you for doing that, Darian.
So this thread that I've linked, it's a little bit behind on the minutes, partly because I think the last few meetings really have been people just inside Google Docs typing stuff. But at the top level of each meeting minute, there's the link to the call. The call doesn't happen on this channel, partly because this channel is being used for the security working group, and partly because it was initially on Fernando's own channel and we just left it there. But it is open to the public. You can come if you want to think and talk and work on governance. And yeah, and obviously you're welcome to. Any other things that you guys thought of that maybe I could elucidate?
You mentioned, right, there's nothing to do or know right now. It's just communication. Is there, like, when's the time that we'll know, I guess? I'm sure it says on the PR, but.
So basically, in that same repo that the PR is in, there is a document called Decision Making Guide, and it lays out how to create the voting body in each sub-project that will eventually pick the representative. So what I would say is look forward to whichever project you're involved in the next few meetings, maybe not the next one, maybe the one after or something, someone basically saying, hey, let's start doing this because soon we're going to have to pick a representative for our project. So the more people know that this is a thing that's heading in that direction, the less of a surprise that'll be. And the more you can think about, all right, well, who is in this project, who votes, etc. But really, you know, I don't actually think, like, no one has homework here. If you're interested, I want you to go read these things and familiarize yourself, and that would be lovely. But like, I don't want to say, go do work. Like, that's not what this is.
I really appreciate the update, though. Thank you for taking all the questions. Anyone else have last thoughts? I'll be quiet for a little.
So the expectation is that this gets sorted before the end of the year?
The expectation I would have is that the Software Steering Council does. If we're lucky, so does the third and final body, the executive board. But that document is still in a draft and there's a lot of back and forth. And once a thing comes out of draft, voting takes up to 4 weeks. So I hope so.
Cool.
But you know, if it doesn't, it'll be soon thereafter. We're not, I mean, this process has taken, 2.5 years, but we are in the final chapter of it.
Congratulations on that. I know it's been a really long road.
It's been fun. I call it quorum talk. It's the world's most boring podcast.
Sorry, folks, I had a crazy morning.
Hey, look at that.
And just here for like the last 30 seconds, but I was hearing Darian finishing up. So sorry for coming in so late. I apologize. But thanks, Darian, for picking up. We do have, I don't know if you passed along the link. We had some like minimal slides.
I did not know because the slides look like they might have still had notes in them. So I thought maybe I'll just verbally describe. And I didn't give too much context because I waited to the last second. So really all I said is there's this vote for the SSC. Here's what the SSC is. You don't have any homework.
Yeah, no, I think the slides are fine if anybody wants to take a quick look. I don't think there's anything there that's an issue if folks want to take a quick look.
I don't think I can access them. I don't know if other people are having.
It's possible that they have. Hold on, let me change the access link.
Also, to anyone, I know we're approaching the hour. If you have to run, feel free. Sometimes we go a little over if you have time. So no worries either way.
Okay, I think it should be updated now. Sorry about that.
Working for me, thank you.
I think these were like the notes. I'll leave the notes in the back.
And Fernando, if you get a chance, go watch this video in the future. There were notebooks that are 7 to 10 years old that were shared throughout this call. So you might be a little fun nostalgic trip for you to see notebooks that are that old that still exist out there.
Who would own the oldest notebook? Would it be you or Brian?
I mean, yeah, it would be one of us early on, and who knows what's been deleted. Probably tracing, in terms of notebooks and usage, tracing back to the tutorials from, for example, the IPython in-depth tutorial was a repo that we used very early on to teach workshops around, and we did write notebooks for it very early on. And so those date back probably to, I think that repo goes back to 2011, 2012, which was really back kind of when we announced, when we first announced it publicly, and when the format stabilized into the current JSON format, or at least the earlier iterations of the current JSON-based format.
I like how Roland put it, the original untitled IPyMB.
I don't think it was. I don't think it was untitled. I think it was like a UUID or something.
Are there any quick questions on the governance notes? I mean, I know that it was kind of chaotic to show up like this, and I really do apologize. It's just the mornings are that time with the kiddos, but the basic idea really is that PR 98 was voted on, was kind of open for a long time, and it has gone in, but it's been somewhat dormant in a sense, dormant because the next phase, which is the PR 103 on the Software Steering Council, is what really will make it sort of matter a lot more and become much more relevant. But because that PR is now open, it's probably a good idea for folks to take a look at this, because technically this has been adopted, and what we tried to do was really capture existing practices across the projects, but we do want to harmonize them so that it's a little bit easier to have. Jupyter is huge, right? And thank you, Isabella and others, for these kinds of activities that help keep some high-level perspective on the project, but precisely harmonizing decision-making and conversations and discussions and procedures across a project this big is hard. And that's the intent of this, was to read kind of from what existed, from our practices, not impose anything new, but formalize and structure those processes in terms of how to make, especially in how to make decisions across the projects, both individually and when things cut across. And the Software Steering Council, we hope, will become a good body where those decisions that are big and complicated can funnel in, where JEPs can be managed. And because that one is now in review, we really would like people to take a look at what actually went into 98. What are those guides? Because we will want to begin applying this by basically formalizing those individual decision-making bodies, bootstrapping them in the process we described, which would be basically work with someone from the steering council and each individual team, bootstrap that formal voting body of whatever size is appropriate. It's not the same thing to have a decision-making team for something as big as Jupyter Hub as it is to say IPython that might have very few super active people working on it. And so sizes will matter, and they should be chosen kind of consistent with the structure of each project. But if people, these are meant to be living documents. So even though these have been merged and they're there and they've been there for a few months, if people have concerns, ideas, or feedback, come by, either pitch in on GitHub or even come on the Fridays. As Darian said, it's the world's most boring podcast, but we do keep at it, and it does produce these things. And hopefully when all of this is merged, it'll be easier to kind of unlock energy that I think exists in the community and that I know that people are impatient for. So sorry for the delay, but hopefully these quick notes, there's links in there to all of the relevant documents, so you folks can open them from there. And we're happy to take feedback. And I do want to say this would not have happened if Darian hadn't been at the helm for 2 years. We owe him an immense debt of gratitude for all the work he has done in like keeping us on task and leading a really, actually at times, a very difficult set of conversations. And he's been absolutely incredibly generous with his time and wisdom. So thanks, Darian.
Thank you so much. You're too kind.
And yeah, thank you for both the updates. That was great to hear. Any final thoughts people have? Wrapping up. Questions, excitement.
I'm excited that you hosted 12 of these. Thank you for your consistency.
I'm not sure if it's 11 or 12, but we're
either way, it's over 10. Good job. Thank you. Is there one more before the year's over?
At least. I'm thinking December might not be feasible. Yeah, it's hard to dodge and have a really early call right after November. So likely just November, but to be decided. I'll make sure to announce it. That's my current thought though. But yeah, thank you. I'm happy they've been going. It's been a real adventure, and I love seeing what people are thinking about each month. It's always a different call every time. Never know what I'm walking into. Yeah.
Thank you, Isabella.
Yeah. And in that case, I'm going to link you can always give feedback on these calls. It's just a few questions, make sure things aren't broken, and you can tell me if something's wrong or you have ideas. And I do know for sure we are having a November one. I do have an agenda for that I'll link to. If you were so inspired by today, you already know what you want to share in a month. Regardless, thank you everyone for your time, and thank you all for your help keeping things running when we had an empty agenda today. I think we ended up with some great discussions, but that would not have been possible without all your participation and impromptu shares. So thank you and have a great rest of your day. See ya.
Thank you everyone for your